It began with the sound of an envelope slapping against my front porch. Delivered not by a friendly mailman, but by a smug courier who looked relieved to get away as fast as possible. I bent down, opened the thick packet, and saw the words that made my jaw tighten: notice of civil suit. The plaintiff was none other than Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, who had been circling me for months like a vulture waiting for a scrap. My property sat on the edge of the neighborhood, but was never part of her HOA. My grandfather had owned this land long before her subdivision sprouted like weeds, and our deeds had been ironclad. Yet Karen had spent months telling anyone who would listen that my refusal to pay her dues was illegal and that I needed to be forced into compliance. Now, staring at the lawsuit she had filed, I realized she'd decided to make her delusion official. The complaint was absurd. Karen accused me of unlawful detachment from community governance, visual disruption of neighborhood unity, and even spiritual damage to property value. Her arrogance bled through every page, written in language so self-righteous it made my stomach churn. But the last line was the one that made me laugh despite my anger. Defendant to be removed from premises within 30 days or fined $500 daily until compliance. Karen wasn't just coming after me, she was trying to erase me from my own land. I didn't waste time fuming. I picked up my phone, called my attorney, and sent him the scanned documents. He laughed just as hard as I did. She's either lost her mind or thinks the court system is her private gavel. He said, "Don't worry. 3 minutes in front of a judge, and this whole thing collapses." Still, I prepared carefully. I gathered every deed, survey map, an exemption form proving beyond doubt that my property predated the HOA by decades. I even had county letters confirming that no association could retroactively claim my land. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. Karen arrived at the courthouse with her entourage of board members trailing behind like ducks, her bulk swaying with self-importance. She carried a massive binder crammed with fabricated bylaws, photographs of my house taken without consent, and her signature clipboard like it was a royal decree. When she spotted me, she sneered, her voice carrying across the marble hall. "Enjoy your last day squatting where you don't belong. By the time I'm finished, you'll wish you had just paid your dues." Inside the courtroom, she strutted to the plaintiff's table, spreading her documents like a queen laying out her jewels. I sat calmly, my single folder resting on the desk in front of me. The judge, a no-nonsense man with a reputation for detesting frivolous lawsuits, raised an eyebrow at the sheer volume of Karen's papers. "Ms. Karen," he began, "you're alleging unlawful occupancy of land outside your association." She nodded vigorously, jowls shaking with excitement. "Yes, Your Honor. He refuses to follow our HOA rules, and by doing so, he disrupts the entire neighborhood. He owes us years of fees and must be removed immediately." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Harris, your response." I stood, slid one deed across the bench, and spoke evenly. "Your Honor, my family has owned this property since 1957. The HOA was established in 1994. My land was never annexed, never voted into the association, and county records confirm this." I handed over the official county exemption letter. The judge skimmed it, then set it aside with a sigh that told me he had already made up his mind. But the real twist came not from me. Halfway through the proceedings, the door to the courtroom opened, and in walked Mr. Alvarez, the retired county clerk. He held a worn leather briefcase, walked straight to the bench, and handed the judge a sealed record. "Your Honor, I handled the filing when this HOA was first created. This is the original charter. It explicitly lists excluded properties. And Mr. Harris's land is clearly noted. The judge opened the document, scanned it, and looked up at Karen. MS. Karen, your lawsuit has no basis. In fact, this appears dangerously close to harassment. Karen's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. She jumped to her feet, waving her arms, shouting, "He's lying. They're all lying. I am the law in that neighborhood. Without me, everything falls apart." Her voice cracked into hysteria, echoing off the walls. The judge's gavel slammed once, sharp and final. Enough. This court rules in favor of the defendant. Case dismissed with prejudice. MS. Karen, you will reimburse court costs, and you are hereby warned against further frivolous action. The entire hearing had lasted less than 3 minutes after the evidence was presented, just as my attorney had predicted. Karen's mountain of lies collapsed faster than it took me to recite my family's deed. She slumped back into her chair, defeated, muttering under her breath as her board members quietly gathered their things, refusing to meet her eyes. And as I walked out of that courtroom, neighbors who had silently followed the case clapped me on the back, whispering thank yous and congratulations. Karen had tried to crush me under the weight of her false authority. But in the end, it was her own arrogance that got flattened beneath the gavel. Karen's defeat should have ended there, but she couldn't stop herself. Even after the gavel fell, she stormed out of the courtroom shouting that it was all rigged, that the judge was corrupt, that the county clerk was in on some grand conspiracy to protect me. The echo of her ranting bounced down the marble hall as onlookers stared, some smirking, others shaking their heads. For years she had frightened people into silence with threats of fines, letters plastered on doors, and her endless tirades. Now the tables had turned, and she was the spectacle everyone whispered about with a mix of pity and relief. But what came next revealed the depth of her arrogance. 2 days after the case was dismissed, Karen called a special HOA meeting. She still believed she could salvage control by convincing her neighbors that the court had made a mistake. She printed flyers accusing me of bribery, plastered them across the neighborhood, and stood in the clubhouse shouting into a microphone as though sheer volume could erase the judge's ruling. What she didn't realize was that several neighbors were filming the entire thing. And by that evening, the clips were spreading across social media under the caption, "HOA President Loses Lawsuit. Blames Everyone." The county saw those videos too, and that was the crack that split the dam. Investigators pulled HOA financial records and discovered irregularities, misused funds, forged receipts, and overcharging residents for landscaping improvements that never happened. The same arrogance that led her to sue me had led her to dip her hands into money she thought no one would question. Now, with the court's spotlight already on her, there was nowhere left to hide. The twist arrived at the next hearing. Months later, I hadn't expected to be called again, but this time I wasn't a defendant. I sat in the gallery while Karen shuffled into court, no longer with her mountain of binders, just a single lawyer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, thousands in HOA dues funneled into personal accounts, vacations billed as board retreats, her son's new car listed under community patrol vehicle. The courtroom gasped. The reporters scribbled furiously, and Karen's face sagged under the weight of exposure. She tried to deny it, to pin it on her treasurer, on her vice president, on anyone but herself. But the treasurer and vice president had already flipped, handing over emails where Karen barked orders in all caps. demanding they cover the books for her spending. When the guilty verdict came down, Karen didn't scream this time. She simply slumped, her arrogance drained into silence. The judge sentenced her to 4 years for fraud and ordered restitution to every family she had bled dry. Watching her let out in cuffs, head bowed, was a moment of poetic symmetry. The same woman who once threatened me with eviction, now being evicted from her throne of lies. The neighborhood transformed after her fall. Without Karen's grip, the HOA dissolved by unanimous vote, replaced with a cooperative effort where decisions were made in open meetings and no one feared retaliation. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact in driveways now gathered for cookouts. Kids played freely on sidewalks chalked with color, and gardens bloomed without threat of fines. The air itself felt lighter, no longer thick with suspicion and control. I often thought back to that first moment in the courtroom, when the judge skimmed my deed and dismissed Karen's entire case in under 3 minutes. It struck me that justice doesn't always roar with long speeches or dramatic battles. Sometimes it's as simple as truth standing firm while lies collapse under their own weight. My land remained mine, untouched and free, not because I fought louder than her, but because the law was stronger than her arrogance. Karen's name is now a cautionary tale in our county. Mention it, and people roll their eyes or laugh. Some shake their heads in disbelief that one person could wield so much fear for so long. But more importantly, they remember the ending, that a bully with a clipboard can fall in less time than it takes to count to 3. So I leave the question with you: is Karen's punishment enough? Or should people who weaponize power and law for personal gain face even harsher consequences?